I never imagined my wedding day would start with a slap. Jessica stood frozen at the altar, her heart pounding in her chest as her mind tried to process what had just happened. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The day she and Matthew would make their vows, surrounded by friends and family, starting their journey as husband and wife. But instead, the morning was filled with confusion, tension, and a shocking moment that no one could have predicted. The sound of a slap echoed through the air, and the entire room fell silent. Everyone turned to look, unsure of what had just occurred. There, standing just a few feet away from Jessica, was Matthew's mother, Karen. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes wide with disbelief. And to everyone's surprise, it wasn't directed at the bridegroom. It was aimed at Jessica, the bride, the woman who was about to marry her son. And the worst part? She didn't even realize who Jessica was. Karen had walked into the venue, and in her mind she was still dealing with the stress of the day, the flowers, the seating arrangements, the endless checklist. She hadn't even noticed that the woman standing in front of her, dressed in a beautiful white gown, was the very same woman who would become her daughter-in-law. Jessica felt a mix of shock and embarrassment. She looked around the room, hoping to find some reassurance, some sign that this was all just a misunderstanding. But there was none. The silence was deafening. Every eye was now on her, and she could feel the heat of their stares. For a moment she thought she might faint. But then she saw him. Matthew, her soon-to-be husband, standing at the altar, his face a picture of confusion and shock. He had been eagerly waiting for this moment, but now his expression shifted from excitement to something else entirely. His mother's slap had shattered the atmosphere in an instant, and now everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. Matthew's eyes locked onto his mother, and then to Jessica. He was still processing what had just happened, but his protective instincts kicked in immediately. In a split second he was at Jessica's side, his hand gently touching her arm, offering her comfort in the midst of this strange chaos. His gaze never left Karen. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Matthew's voice was steady but filled with disbelief. The room was still, no one daring to speak. All eyes were now on Matthew as he stood between his mother and Jessica. It was as if the entire world had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing, unsure of what to say. She hadn't meant to hurt Jessica. She hadn't meant to cause this scene. But in that moment, her emotions had gotten the best of her. Her son's wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day for her too. But somehow everything felt wrong. I didn't mean to," Karen stammered, her voice cracking. "I thought she was." "You thought what?" "You thought she was just another guest." Matthew's tone was sharp, his frustration now evident. "She's my bride, Mom. The woman I love. You don't get to treat her like this, especially not on our wedding day." The tension in the room was unbearable. Karen looked around at the guests, her face reddening further. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, and it made her realize how out of line she had been. She had lost control and now there was no way to take it back. Jessica stood there, unsure of what to do or say. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had always heard stories of difficult mother-in-laws, but she had never imagined her wedding day would include such an uncomfortable confrontation. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she couldn't find the words. This was not how she had imagined the day would go. And yet, somehow, despite the shock and confusion, she found herself feeling a sense of calm in Matthew's presence. He was there, standing by her side, ready to protect her no matter what. This moment, though unexpected and painful, was a reminder of why she had chosen him. Because Matthew wasn't just the man she loved. He was the man who would stand up for her when it mattered most. I was standing there, in my wedding dress, stunned and humiliated. The slap had already faded from the sting of my skin, but the shock and confusion still clung to me. All I wanted was for this day to be perfect, to start my new life with Matthew, but now everything was out of control. His mother, Karen, had slapped me at the altar, and I still couldn't wrap my head around why. The guests were whispering and Matthew's face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. But his protective instinct kicked in the moment he saw what happened. He pulled me close to him, as if trying to shield me from the chaos that was unfolding before our eyes. His grip on my arm was firm, and I could feel the tension in his muscles. He wasn't angry with me, but I could sense the frustration radiating from him. He was trying to keep it together for both of us, but I could see the storm brewing in his eyes. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you?" Matthew's voice cut through the silence. It was sharp, and it was clear that he wasn't going to let this slide. He turned to Karen, his expression hardening. "You're embarrassing me, Mom. You don't do that to her, especially not here." Karen, who had been standing frozen in disbelief, now took a step back, her face flushed with a mixture of regret and confusion. She seemed to have no idea what she had just done. Her mouth opened and closed as if she was trying to find the words, but none came. "I didn't mean to," Karen stammered, her voice shaky. I thought she was just one of the bridesmaids. I didn't know." I felt my breath catch in my throat. The woman who had raised Matthew, the woman who was supposed to be my mother-in-law, had slapped me because she didn't even recognize me. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a complete lack of respect. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on me, on us. The room had gone from excitement and joy to a tense silence, and I couldn't tell if the guests were just as shocked or if they were waiting for something else to happen. Matthew stood between Karen and me, a protective barrier. I could tell he was struggling to stay calm. His eyes were locked on his mother, and for the first time since I met him, I could see how truly disappointed he was. "You thought she was just a bridesmaid?" Matthew's voice was low, almost cold, as he spoke to his mother. "Mom, that's the love of my life. She's my bride. You don't get to treat her like that, not now, not ever." I could feel my heart racing, but I was also starting to feel a strange sense of strength. Matthew was standing up for me, even in the face of his own mother's disrespect. I had never seen him so serious, so determined. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a raw protectiveness that I had never witnessed before. It was both comforting and heartbreaking at the same time. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Karen whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know it was you." The tears were starting to well up in her eyes now, but it was hard for me to feel sorry for her. She had crossed a line, and the damage had already been done. The slap wasn't the worst part. It was the fact that she didn't even recognize me as her future daughter-in-law, the woman her son was marrying. She had been so caught up in her own world, in her own stress, that she couldn't even see the woman standing right in front of her. Matthew's jaw clenched, and I could see his frustration growing by the second. "Mom, you're not even trying to understand, are you?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't care if you're stressed. You don't get to treat Jessica like that. Ever." He was standing his ground, and it made me love him even more. In that moment I realized just how much he cared for me. But at the same time I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion, the day we were supposed to make our vows in front of the people who mattered most. And yet here we were, caught in a mess of misunderstandings and hurt feelings. Karen stood there, speechless, and for a moment the room remained still. The tension was palpable. I wanted to say something to defend myself, but what could I say? What could I possibly say to make this better? I had never been in a situation like this before, and I didn't know how to handle it. I wanted to make everything okay, to erase the discomfort, but it wasn't that simple. As I stood there, caught between Matthew and his mother, I realized just how much I loved him. He was here fighting for me, protecting me when no one else seemed to care. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened with his mother, no matter how difficult things might get, Matthew and I would face it together. I stood there, still in shock, trying to process what had just happened. My wedding day, the day I had dreamed about for years, was quickly turning into a nightmare. The slap from Karen, Matthew's mother, was only the beginning. The tension in the room was unbearable, and I could feel every single eye on me. I didn't know what to do. The silence was almost too much to bear. Matthew stood beside me, his hand still gripping my arm, but I could feel his body stiffening, his frustration building by the second. He was doing his best to keep it together, to calm the storm that had erupted, but I could tell this was going to be one of those moments that would change everything. He had always been a calm and collected person, but right now I saw a side of him I had never seen before. He wasn't just mad, he was deeply hurt. Hurt by his mother's actions. Hurt by the disrespect shown to me, the woman he loved. And as I looked at him, I knew that he was trying his best to protect me, to shield me from the harsh reality that was unfolding. But I couldn't help but feel this deep, gnawing sadness. It wasn't just about the slap. It was about the fact that his mother didn't even recognize me. It was about how little respect she seemed to have for me, for our relationship, and for the life we were trying to build together. The fact that she couldn't even tell I was the bride was a blow that hit harder than anything else. I had hoped that this moment, this day, would be one of pure joy, but now it felt like the foundation of our future was already cracking. "Matthew, please," Karen said, her voice quivering. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I thought she was one of the bridesmaids. I wasn't thinking. I've just been so stressed with everything. And I—" Her voice trailed off as she tried to explain herself, but the words fell flat. Didn't matter why. She did it. The fact remained that she had slapped me in front of everyone. I couldn't help but wonder if this was a sign of things to come. Was this the type of person I was going to have to deal with for the rest of my life? Was this how our relationship with Matthew's family was going to be? The questions swirled in my mind, but I didn't have answers. Matthew, on the other hand, was not having it. "That's not an excuse, Mom," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You can't just slap someone and then say it's because you're stressed. You don't get to treat her like that, not now, not ever. She's my wife. She's going to be my family, and I'm not going to let you disrespect her like this." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was clear that Matthew was standing up for me, that he was making a choice, and that choice was to protect me no matter what. I had never been prouder of him than I was in that moment. But even as I stood there, feeling the weight of everything happening, I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fix. Karen had crossed a line, and it wasn't something that could just be brushed off. Matthew's anger wasn't just about the slap. It was about the years of pent-up tension and frustration with his mother. The way she had always hovered over him, always tried to control every aspect of his life. And now it was spilling over into our wedding, our special day. I could see the hurt in Matthew's eyes as he looked at his mother. He didn't want to fight with her. He didn't want to be in this situation. But at the same time, he couldn't stand by and let her treat me like that. "I don't understand, Mom," Matthew continued, his voice quieter now but still firm. "How could you not see her? How could you not recognize her?" He was struggling to find the right words, but the hurt was clear in his voice. "She's my bride. The woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life with." Karen's face crumpled as she seemed to finally grasp the gravity of the situation. She reached out as if trying to touch Matthew, but he stepped back, his face hardening. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm just so sorry." But it was too late. The damage had been done, and the apology, while sincere, couldn't undo what had already happened. "I don't know what to say," Karen said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean for any of this. I was just so overwhelmed." Matthew didn't respond right away. He just stood there looking at his mother. I could tell he was struggling, torn between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. But in the end, he knew what needed to be done. He couldn't let this slide. Not for my sake, not for his sake, and certainly not for the sake of our future. He turned to me then, his gaze softening as he spoke quietly. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I never imagined it would be like this. I know this isn't how you pictured our wedding day." His words hit me like a wave, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. He was apologizing even though none of this was his fault, and that just made me love him even more. "It's okay," I whispered, forcing a smile despite the pain. "I'm just glad you're here. With me." And for the first time since the slap, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the perfect wedding I had dreamed of, but it was real. It was ours, and we would figure it out together. I could still feel the weight of the silence in the room, like a heavy fog hanging over us. Matthew stood close, his hand still holding mine, his touch grounding me as we tried to navigate through this incredibly awkward moment. The guests were shifting in their seats, unsure of whether they should say something, or just let the tension continue to build. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how this would unfold. Matthew's mother, Karen, had apologized. But the apology didn't feel like enough. The air was thick with unresolved emotions, and I could tell it wasn't just about the slap anymore. It was about the years of tension between mother and son that had now come to the surface on one of the most important days of our lives. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jessica," Karen repeated, her voice quiet now. trembling with the weight of regret. I just wasn't thinking. I've been so stressed and everything's just spiraling. I didn't even realize it was you. I'm sorry. Her words felt genuine, but at the same time it didn't change what had happened. A part of me wanted to just forgive her, to let this whole thing go. But another part of me was still reeling from the shock. This wasn't just a small misunderstanding. It was a moment that would change the dynamic of our relationship with Matthew's family forever. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. Matthew, standing beside me, didn't seem ready to let it go either. He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the effort to keep his composure. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. I'm sorry you had to go through that, he said, his voice low but steady. I never thought something like this would happen. I never wanted you to feel disrespected, especially not in front of everyone. I looked up at him and for a brief moment everything else faded away. The anger, the tension, the awkwardness. It all melted when I saw the concern in his eyes. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about us, about how we would face these challenges together, how we would support each other no matter what. I could feel the love and care in his words, and it was enough to calm the storm inside of me. It's not your fault, I whispered, squeezing his hand. I know you didn't want this to happen. But even as I said the words, I could feel the sadness creeping in. This wasn't how I had imagined our wedding day. I had dreamed of walking down the aisle surrounded by love and joy, but instead, I had been slapped by the woman who was supposed to welcome me into her family. I just don't get it, Matthew said, his voice filled with frustration. I don't understand why she couldn't see you. Why she couldn't recognize that you're the woman I'm marrying. He shook his head, a look of disbelief still on his face. I don't want to fight with her. I don't. But I can't let her treat you like this. Not now, not ever. He turned back to his mother, his expression softening but still firm. Mom, I need you to understand something. Jessica is my wife, and she deserves respect, especially from you. If you can't give that to her, then I don't know what to say. Karen looked at him, her face full of regret, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. She wasn't a bad person, I knew that. But the way she had acted today, the way she had treated me, it hurt. And it was going to take time for her to understand that this was not just a misunderstanding. This was about boundaries. This was about respect. I never meant to disrespect her, Karen said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I've just been so caught up in everything and I'm sorry. But I couldn't help but feel that the apology was more for her own sake than mine. She wanted to move past it, to fix it, but I wasn't sure it was that simple. I didn't know if I could just forget what had happened, and I didn't know how things would be from here on out. Matthew's gaze softened as he looked at his mother, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to choose between her and me, but in this moment it was clear that he was choosing me. Mom, he said gently, I know you're stressed and I know this isn't easy, but you can't just brush this off. Jessica is my priority now, and if you want a relationship with me, with us, then you have to respect her. No exceptions. The room was still, the air thick with tension. I could see Karen's face fall as she absorbed his words, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she truly understood the weight of what Matthew was saying. But then, as if realizing the gravity of the situation, Karen nodded slowly. I understand, she said, her voice small but sincere. I'm sorry, Jessica. Truly. I never should have done that. I nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to move past this and let the wedding continue. But another part of me was still hurt. I wasn't sure how to fix it, how to move forward from here. But I knew one thing for certain. I had Matthew by my side. And with him, I could face anything. Thank you, I said softly, my voice barely audible. I appreciate your apology, but it's going to take time. Matthew's hand tightened around mine, and I could feel his resolve, his commitment to making this right. We'll get through this, he said quietly. Together. I could feel the tension in the air, like a thick fog that refused to lift. The guests were still sitting in silence, unsure of what to do next. The ceremony had come to a grinding halt, and the dream I had envisioned for so long felt like it was slipping away. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I had been standing there, paralyzed by the shock and confusion, But now I knew that I couldn't let this define my wedding day. I had come this far with Matthew, and no one, not even his mother, was going to take this moment away from us. I turned to Matthew, feeling his hand still firmly holding mine. His presence was a comfort, even though the situation was far from ideal. His face was tense, his jaw clenched, but there was also a quiet strength in him. I knew he was still processing everything, but I could see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't just protecting me, he was fighting for us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Matthew," I said softly, my voice trembling slightly, "we don't have to let this ruin everything. This is still our day, and we can still make it what we want." Matthew looked at me, his expression softening just a little. His hand gently squeezed mine, as if to reassure me that we would get through this. "You're right," he said, his voice low but steady. "This is our day, and I'm not going to let anyone take that from us. Not even my mom." There was a fire in his voice now, a quiet resolve that made me believe him. I nodded, grateful for his support. But as the silence stretched on, I couldn't ignore the reality of what had just happened. This wasn't just a small mistake. Karen's actions had opened a wound that couldn't be easily healed, and I wasn't sure how things were going to look between us moving forward. I had hoped that the wedding would bring our families together, but now it felt like it was tearing us apart. I glanced at Karen, standing off to the side, her eyes downcast. She looked remorseful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that her apology was more about her own guilt than about understanding the gravity of what had happened. She hadn't just slapped me. She had disrespected me in front of everyone, in front of Matthew. That was a line I wasn't sure we could easily cross. But Matthew wasn't giving up. He turned back to his mother, his voice calm but firm. "Mom, I need you to understand something," he said. "You can't just apologize and think everything's fine. This isn't just about a mistake. This is about respect. And right now you've broken that. I don't know how long it's going to take, but you need to show Jessica that you respect her. I'm not going to stand by and watch her be treated like this." Karen nodded slowly, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I could tell that she was truly remorseful, but the damage had already been done. And now all we could do was move forward. I looked at Matthew again, and this time I saw something different in his eyes. He wasn't just angry. He was hurt. Hurt by his mother's actions, but also by the realization that the woman who had always been his rock, the woman he had always looked to for support, had let him down in the worst possible way. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jessica," Karen said again, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to make you feel this way." Her words were soft, but they didn't erase the feeling of betrayal I had inside. "I know, Karen," I said, forcing a smile, "but actions speak louder than words." It wasn't an easy thing to say, but it was the truth. I didn't want to hold on to this anger, but it was hard to let go. I wasn't sure what kind of relationship I would have with Karen going forward. Would she truly accept me, or would there always be this barrier between us? Would we ever be able to move past this moment? Or would it be something that haunted us for years to come? Matthew turned back to me, his expression softening once more. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. I nodded, though I didn't feel okay. How could I? "I'm okay," I said, my voice shaky. "But I don't know if I can forgive her yet." Matthew's face tightened, but he didn't push me. He just nodded, acknowledging the weight of my words. "Take your time," he said quietly. "I'm here for you. We'll work through this together." And for the first time since the slap, I felt like maybe we could. We would have to rebuild trust. We would have to set boundaries. And it wasn't going to be easy. But as long as we faced it together, I believed we could find a way forward. After what felt like an eternity, Karen finally spoke again. "I'm so sorry, Jessica," she said, her voice breaking. "I truly am. I know I've hurt you and I can't take that back. But I want to try to make things right. I want to build a relationship with you. I don't want to lose you." Her words were sincere, but I still wasn't sure if I could trust them. Trust wasn't something that came easily, not after something like this. But in that moment I realized something important. I didn't have to forgive her right away. I didn't have to make everything okay immediately. But I could choose to try. And I would, for Matthew, for our future, and for myself. The ceremony had stopped, but the day wasn't over. The wedding wasn't ruined yet, and we still had a choice in how we moved forward. Together. I could feel the weight of the room, the silence pressing against me. The tension from earlier had softened, but it wasn't gone. Karen's apology hung in the air, but there was still a lot to process. Matthew and I stood together side by side, the weight of everything still hanging over us. His hand was firmly in mine, but the uncertainty in the air made everything feel fragile. I wanted to move forward. I wanted to get back to the celebration, to the vows we had planned, but it felt like there was a gap between what was supposed to be and what was happening. "Are you sure you're okay?" Matthew's voice was soft, but I could hear the concern in it. I turned to him, giving him a smile that was more for him than for me. "I will be," I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty I was feeling. "I just need a moment to process all of this." Matthew nodded, understanding. He didn't press me for more. He knew what I needed, and I appreciated that more than anything. "We don't have to rush," he said quietly. "We'll take it one step at a time." But even as he said the words, I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was hurting too. I knew he was. It wasn't just about the slap. It wasn't just about the wedding being disrupted. It was about the realization that his mother, the woman who had always been there for him, had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "I don't want to ruin today for you," I said softly, my voice catching in my throat. "This is your wedding day too. I don't want to take away from that." Matthew's eyes softened and he stepped closer to me. "Jessica," he said gently, "you are not ruining anything. This day is still about us. It's about our love, our commitment to each other. Nothing else matters." His words settled over me like a blanket of comfort, but I couldn't help but wonder if the damage had already been done. How would we look back on this day in the years to come? Would it always be a reminder of the moment when things started to unravel, or would we find a way to move past it? The thought lingered in my mind, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't let it define us. Not today. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. "For standing by me." Matthew smiled softly, his eyes filled with love. "Always." The guests, who had been so quiet during the exchange, began to murmur among themselves. I could sense their discomfort, but there was also a sense of understanding. They had seen the tension, felt it too. But now things seemed to be shifting ever so slightly. The ceremony, though interrupted, wasn't over. And while the path ahead was uncertain, I knew we could find a way forward. It was like we were standing at a crossroads, unsure of which direction to take, but knowing that together we could figure it out. "I know this hasn't been easy," Matthew said, his gaze still fixed on me. "But I want to marry you today. I don't care what happened before. I care about what happens next." I nodded, my heart swelling with affection. "I want that too," I said quietly. It wasn't going to be easy. I wasn't sure how things would unfold with Karen, or if she would ever truly understand the impact of what had happened. But I was committed to making this work. With Matthew by my side, I knew I could face anything. "Let's do this," I said, my voice gaining strength as I spoke the words I had been longing to say. And just like that, things shifted. The air seemed to lighten, the weight lifting ever so slightly. We weren't pretending that everything was okay, but we were choosing to move forward. Together. Karen, who had been standing quietly off to the side, stepped forward again. Her face was filled with regret, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. "I know I've hurt you," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "And I'm so sorry. I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to try to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes." Her words weren't magical, but they were a start. I knew it wouldn't be an easy road. Trust, once broken, wasn't something that could be mended overnight. But the fact that she was willing to try, that was something. Matthew turned to her, his face still marked by the weight of the situation, but there was a softness in his expression now. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice steady but filled with a hint of exhaustion. "But it's going to take time. Both of you need to understand that." Karen nodded, her expression somber. "I understand," she said quietly. "And I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at Matthew, then back at Karen. There was so much that needed to be said, so much to work through. But for the first time since everything had gone wrong, I felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't the perfect wedding I had dreamed of, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe it was about learning how to move forward, even when things didn't go as planned. Matthew and I had already taken the first step, and together we would figure out the rest. "Let's get married," I said, my voice stronger this time. "Let's do it, no matter what." Matthew smiled at me, a look of love and determination on his face. "Let's do it." And just like that, the ceremony began again. Slowly but surely we were moving forward. Not with perfection, but with love, with understanding, and with the commitment to work through whatever came our way. Together. I could feel the weight of the air as the ceremony slowly began to move forward again. There was still a lingering tension, but it was as if we had all agreed, without saying a word, to try to make this work. The guests had slowly started to relax, their whispers quieting as the mood shifted from shock to something more hopeful. Matthew's hand was still holding mine, and I could feel the steadiness in his grip. It was a small gesture, but in that moment it meant everything to me. I knew that no matter what happened today, we were in this together. "Are you sure about this?" Matthew whispered to me, his voice low, almost as if he needed reassurance, even though I could see the determination in his eyes. "Are you sure you want to keep going?" I met his gaze and nodded, a small but genuine smile on my face. "I'm sure," I replied, my voice soft but confident. "This is still our day, Matthew. We'll make it through." And with that, we both knew what needed to be done. The ceremony was far from perfect, but that didn't matter anymore. We were still going to say our vows. We were still going to take that step into our future. With each step I took toward the altar, I felt a little lighter. The weight of the earlier tension was still there, but with every passing second, it started to feel less significant. We were here and we were moving forward. That's all that mattered. Karen had stepped back, standing off to the side, her eyes on us. She was still watching, still apologizing silently, but I could tell she was trying to stay out of the way. She knew that the ball was now in her court. She had to prove herself, not just to me but to Matthew as well. He was right. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about us, and it was about the respect we deserved as a couple. As I stood next to Matthew, I could feel the weight of his presence beside me, a steady, reassuring force. He had always been the calm one between us, but now I could feel that there was something different in him. The calm had not faded, but there was a quiet strength that came from the way he was holding himself, from the way he was still looking out for me. It was the strength of someone who knew that even in the face of adversity, love could carry you through. "I'm ready," I said, looking up at him once more. The words felt like a declaration, a promise to both of us. He smiled, his eyes softening. "I'm ready too," he said, his voice steady, full of love. And with that, we turned back toward the altar, where the officiant was patiently waiting. There was still so much to sort out between us and Karen, and so much we would need to work through, but for now we could focus on the moment. The moment where we were making a promise to each other, in front of our family and friends. A promise that was bigger than the obstacles we had already faced. A promise that would carry us through whatever else was to come. The vows felt like they held more weight now, as though every word carried with it the promise of not just love, but resilience. As we spoke our vows, there was a quiet strength in the air. The words came easy, even though the path here hadn't been. I promised to love Matthew through all the ups and downs, through every storm that came our way, and to never let go of the love we had. He promised to stand by me, to protect me, and to always be my partner, no matter the challenges we faced. And as we finished, I looked at him, my heart full, knowing that the love we had was far greater than any difficulty. We weren't just promising to stay together through the good times. We were promising to get through the hard times together. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, there was a brief moment where the world seemed to pause. The ceremony hadn't gone as planned, but it was still ours. It was still meaningful. Matthew leaned in and kissed me, his lips soft against mine. And for the first time that day, everything felt right. It wasn't the perfect wedding I had dreamed about, but it was the perfect start to our life together. And I knew no matter what happened from here, we would make it work. As we walked back down the aisle, our hands still intertwined, I could feel the weight of the moment lifting. The day hadn't been perfect, but our love was. It had survived the storm, and it would continue to grow, no matter what came our way. We had already faced one challenge, and now we were walking into our future, side by side, stronger than ever. The guests began to clap, the room filling with the sound of cheers, and I could feel the weight of their support. This was still our day, and it was only the beginning of the journey ahead. A journey that we would walk together no matter what. I could feel the weight of the air slowly lifting as we walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, surrounded by the cheers and applause of our family and friends. The tension that had clouded the ceremony had finally dissipated, and though the day hadn't gone as we had expected, there was a new sense of clarity between Matthew and I. We had just said our vows, promised our love, and stepped into a new chapter of our lives. The wedding wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was all that mattered now. As we made our way to the reception area, I couldn't help but feel a little lighter. Yes, there were still things to work through, things that would take time to heal, but in this moment I could feel the weight of our commitment to each other. We had already faced a challenge today, one that could have torn us apart, but instead we had faced it head-on and come out stronger. There would be more challenges ahead, I was sure of it, but I knew now that with Matthew by my side, we could handle whatever came our way. As we reached the reception, Matthew turned to me, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We did it," he said, his voice low but full of emotion. I smiled back, my heart swelling with love for him. "We did," I agreed, squeezing his hand a little tighter. The guests gathered around us, offering congratulations, but there was something different in the air now. The awkwardness had lifted, replaced by a new understanding. The rest of the evening flowed much more smoothly. The music played, the food was served, and while there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty about how everything would unfold, there was also a sense of hope. Matthew and I shared our first dance as husband and wife, and in that moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of us, moving together to the rhythm of the music, as if we had always belonged here, in each other's arms. The world outside seemed so far away, and for the first time that day, I felt a sense of peace. No matter what had happened before, no matter the complications we faced with his family, we were here. And we were starting our journey together. The night went on with laughter and joy, and while I could tell that Karen was still trying to make amends, I didn't feel the same weight in the air that I had earlier. It was clear that things weren't perfect, but for now they were manageable. The road ahead was uncertain, but I could see the beginnings of healing. And I could see that Matthew was committed to making this work, whatever it took. "I love you," Matthew whispered in my ear as we danced, his breath warm against my skin. "I love you too," I whispered back, a soft smile spreading across my face. And in that moment nothing else mattered. Not the awkwardness with his mother, not the complications of the day. All that mattered was that we were together, and that we were starting our life as husband and wife. The night passed in a blur of conversations, music and laughter, and as we finally slipped away from the party, heading toward the quiet of our honeymoon suite, I felt a sense of relief. This day, while not perfect, had been a reminder that love could withstand anything. It wasn't about having everything go according to plan. It was about finding a way through the mess and coming out stronger on the other side. The challenges we faced today were just the beginning. But as long as we had each other, I knew we would be okay. Our journey had just begun, and whatever came our way, we would face it together. I woke up the next morning, the soft morning light creeping through the curtains of our honeymoon suite, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of calm. Yesterday had been a whirlwind, a roller coaster of emotions, from the shocking moment with Karen to the beautiful vows Matthew and I had shared. But today was different. Today we were starting our life together, just the two of us, and everything else felt like it could be dealt with in time. Matthew was still asleep beside me, his chest rising and falling gently with each breath. I couldn't help but watch him for a moment, taking in the peace of the moment. The man who had stood by me through it all, who had never once hesitated to protect me, to fight for us. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for him. Yesterday had shown me just how much he cared. And I knew that no matter what happened with his family, Matthew and I were strong enough to handle it together. The events of the wedding were still fresh in my mind, but I had a new sense of clarity. Karen's actions had hurt, yes, but they hadn't broken us. In fact, they had only strengthened our bond. I had seen a side of Matthew I'd never known before. The way he had stood up to his mother, the way he had protected me, even when it meant challenging someone he loved. That moment had made me realize how deep his commitment to me was. I quietly slid out of bed, not wanting to wake Matthew just yet. I went to the small window and looked out at the view, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. Felt like a new beginning. Felt like everything was possible now. I couldn't control what had happened the day before, but I could control how I moved forward. Matthew and I were married now, and we had the rest of our lives to figure things out. No more worrying about the small stuff, no more focusing on the things that were out of our hands. We had each other, and that was all we needed. As I stood there watching the sun rise, I felt a sudden wave of emotion wash over me. I was married to Matthew now, my best friend, my partner, and the love of my life. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment I knew that was enough. I heard the sound of Matthew shifting in the bed behind me, and I turned to see him waking up, his eyes slowly fluttering open. He smiled softly as he saw me standing by the window, looking out at the view. "Morning, beautiful," he said, his voice husky with sleep. I smiled back at him, feeling a rush of affection. "Good morning," I replied. He stretched and slowly sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I was just thinking about yesterday," he said, his voice thoughtful. "I know it wasn't what we expected, but I'm glad we got through it." I nodded, walking over to sit next to him on the bed. "I am too," I said, my heart swelling with love. "It wasn't easy, but it's part of our story now, and I wouldn't change a thing." He looked at me, his expression softening, and reached out to take my hand. "I don't want to waste any more time on things that don't matter," he said quietly. "I want to focus on us, on what's ahead. I want to make sure that no matter what happens, we're always on the same team." I squeezed his hand, feeling my heart fill with emotion. "We are on the same team," I said, my voice steady. "And we always will be." We sat there for a moment, just taking in the quiet of the morning, the calmness of the moment. The events of the wedding day had been overwhelming, but now it felt like we were finally in sync. We were starting our life together, and everything else would fall into place in time. Matthew leaned in and kissed me softly, his lips warm and comforting. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," I replied, my heart full. It was a simple exchange, but in that moment it felt like the world had come into focus. We were married, and no matter what challenges we faced, we were ready to face them together. We had already overcome one obstacle, and I knew we could handle anything that came next. Our journey together was just beginning, and there was nothing that could stand in our way. With that thought, I knew that no matter what came our way, Matthew and I would face it as a team, stronger than ever, with love as our foundation. Whatever came next, we would take it on together.